scared for real.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
102 years old, Nosferatu. F.W. Murnau, you had Max Schreck, and probably, my opinion, the greatest vampire film of all time.
Definitely one of the most important vampire films of all time. I'll agree with you right there with Dracula 1931.
But this was inspired by Bram Stoker. There's a lot of differences from Nosferatu compared to the Bram Stoker book, but not enough for the widow to sue and win. That was the thing. She actually won. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the deviations from the novel, you got the setting transferred from Britain in the 1890s to Germany in 1838. The story of Nosferatu is similar to that of Dracula, very, very similar, but he readapts the core characters. Jonathan and Mina are renamed to Thomas and Ellen Hutter. Ellen now occasionally sleepwalks. You remember that one?
Yeah.
And then you have Count Dracula renamed to Count Orlok, and it omits a lot of the secondary players like, Quincy Morris, and changes the names and roles of those who remain. The Van Helsing character was renamed into Dr. Bulwer in reference to the English occult novelist Edward Bulwer Lytton. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Orlok is also believed to have been created by Belial. Am I really that? Belial, who was like the lieutenant demon of Satan, I guess.
Interesting.
So, yeah, Belial. I can't say the name, but you've probably heard reference to the lieutenant demon of Satan before in horror movies.
Yes, yeah.
But Count Dracula is revealed to have been a former, soldier of sorts, killed in battle before returning as a vampire. Orlok's link to Belial is highly significant because Belial is one of the demons traditionally summoned by Goetic magicians, making Orlok someone who practiced dark sorcery. And then really not alluded too much in the movie. But,
no.
But in contrast to Count Dracula, Orlok does not create other vampires. Once
that's
his
important.
victim, very important. Once his victims are killed, that's it. So they kind of allude Count Orlok is starting the plague.
Right. Yeah, he's like the ultimate predator.
Yeah, the ultimate predator. He creates the plague. Stay indoors. It's shown even more in the Werner Herzog adaptation of people freaking out thinking there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
But it's actually Orlok killing everybody. Which is interesting. Orlok also must sleep by day as sunlight kills him in the end. That was something made up by Murnau and the screenwriters, because that there was nothing alluded to in Bram Stoker's novel about Dracula getting killed by sunlight.
No,
but he sleeps during the day.
He sleeps during the day because sunlight weakens him, but it didn't kill him.
Right.
Which is why, like in the Francis Ford Coppola movie,
you see him out in the daylight.
In the day, yeah. It weakens him, but it didn't kill him. Yeah, this is where we get that vampire lore of sunlight killing the vampire.
Yeah, it all comes from this movie here. And Orlok looks extremely inhuman and corpse-like. Now, in the Bram Stoker novel, Dracula is older, but he doesn't look like a corpse. Or he doesn't look like a real demonic figure.
No,
Orlok looks like a demonic figure, and he's the ultimate horrifying vampire. I've never seen a vampire look as frightening as Max Schreck is.
Well, I mean,
Orlok.
isn't that the lasting impact of this movie?
Right,
made in 1922. And it's still absolutely terrifying to watch.
Not only Max Schreck is important, but I think it's F.W. Murnau's just the whole atmosphere, the lighting, the cinematography, the sets. Yeah. And that's one thing Herzog, when he remade Nosferatu in 1979, he was very cognitive of the sets, of the cinematography, because he wanted to capture, because he loved the cinematography and the sets. Yeah. Of F.W. Murnau's original masterpiece. Now, the ending is also completely different, to say the least, because as we mentioned, the Count is ultimately destroyed at sunrise when the Mina analog sacrifices herself to him. That's a thing. Mina doesn't die in the book. No. She dies in the movie. Both versions of the movies. Yeah. She sacrifices herself, so the Count will die in the sunlight. Right. That Dr. Burlow character is the one who kind of comes up with that conclusion that he can die from sunset or sunlight. It's a completely different movie, but again, not so similar according to Bram Stoker's Widow. What are your thoughts on this, Adam?
The lawsuit?
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly, if the lawsuit was to happen today, the Widow Stoker probably wouldn't have much of a platform to stand on. But back in the day, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can see it. We are telling the story of a vampire who purchases land, property in another land, travels to said land, and
True.
You do have a Harker, real estate agent character represented. I mean, so the similarities are there,
Right.
And you can definitely tell that liberties were taken. So now, does that mean I think it was right that after she won her copyright lawsuit, to order every single print of the movie destroyed? That's a little too far.
Yeah.
But
thankfully, not all prints were destroyed.
well, yeah, a handful did survive, and as we talked about last episode, we did the deep dive on Dracula 1931. I mean that Lemley Jr. got a hold of a copy of Nosferatu, and that was his that the fire under him to purchase the rights to Dracula, and he and Universal paid the widow Stoker a lot of money for those rights, and I mean, well, it paid for itself with what we got, but yeah,
right. And there was a lot of similarities between. Well, there's a few key significant similarities with 1931's Dracula and 1922's Nosferatu. The Harker character cutting his thumb.
Sure.
And of course, the whole cross kind of just freaked him out. And of course, Renfield or Harker, whomever, riding in the coach, and it's
right.
Oh, there's no one driving the coach.
There. Yeah. And again, those are all represented in the novel as well. So I mean,
yeah, to a certain degree, but I know Lemley saw the Nosferatu, and he really liked the whole the way Nosferatu handled the cutting of the thumb and everything like that. So,
it's still though the image of Max Schreck as Count Orlok is still so terrifying. Well, and so iconic. I mean,
he doesn't just open the coffin and come out. He rises.
Yeah.
Every time. I mean, that first time we see him rising out of the coffin, and then like slowly going into the room out of the darkness.
It's terrifying.
The silhouette of him going up the stairs is highly mimicked and so iconic.
When he's coming from the bottom of the ship, and he slowly comes up through the porthole. I get this is a. If I throw a Halloween party, one of my favorite things to do is throw this movie on in conjunction with like Phantom of the Opera or Caligari, all these silent movies, so you can still like listen to like party music, but it's playing in the background. It's just so iconic, so terrifying, so visually stunning to watch, and it's one of those movies like. Especially in the horror genre, like a Metropolis, it's an important movie, and it's
extremely.
Thankfully, again, all the prints weren't destroyed on order of Widow Stoker.
Right. So the studio behind Nosferatu, Prana Film, it was a short-lived silent era German studio. Literally, it was founded the year before Nosferatu came out. I guess one of the guys was an occultist, so I guess that there's a lot of the occult, and some people have noted anti-Semitism type undertones. I mean, if you want to read into all that, which I just try to enjoy the movie for what it is. But the studio's intent was to produce occult and supernatural themed films, but only movie that came out of that was Nosferatu.
Yep.
Oh. Again, have a legacy of just one movie like Nosferatu, in my opinion. It's like, wow. But I guess one of the studio heads claimed he was inspired to shoot a vampire film by a war experience. I guess he's got Grau is the guy's name. During the winter of 1916, a Serbian farmer had told him that his father was a vampire and one of the undead. Now, as a lifelong student of the occult, and I guess he was a member of this fraternity of sorts, which again was all about the occult. He had like a magical name of Master Paticus or something, but he was able to imbue Nosferatu with hermetic and mystical undertones. One example was the cryptic contract that Count Orlok and Nock exchanged, which was filled in like these hermetic and alchemical symbol-like things. Remember that?
Yep.
So I guess that was like of an occult kind of thing. But Grau was also a strong influence on Orlok's verminous and emaciated look, and he also designed the film sets, costumes, makeup, and the letter with those Enochian symbols. I'm not good at pronouncing these foreign words, but the visual style was also deeply influenced by the work of some artist, Hugo Steiner Prague, who had illustrated other texts with subjects like Gollum. Remember the Gollum?
Yep.
Remember that?
Yep.
So, I mean, I guess the task was to write a screenplay inspired by the Dracula novel. And although Prana Film had not obtained the film rights, he was an experienced specialist in dark romanticism. He had already worked on, remember the Gollum movie that came out a couple years before?
Yep.
Remember that one?
Yep.
Which the Daimajin trilogy in Japan was kind of
similar.
Sort of similar to that. But Galeen set the story in the fictional North German harbor town of Visborg. He changed the characters' names, added the idea of the vampire bringing the plague via rats on the ship.
Yep.
That was the thing, like in the Dracula movie adaptations, Dracula was a bat, a wolf, but in this he was more of like he turned into rats.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a rat.
With the teeth,
his makeup. Yeah.
And at the end of the Werner Herzog Nosferatu, you see those rat fangs in Bruno Ganz's Harker's character at the end of that one. But this is interesting. Max Schreck was unknown at the time. He had like some co-starring roles, and he'd pop up. He never really became a star.
No.
But Conrad Veidt was again offered this role.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Conrad Veidt. But he had previously worked with Murnau, but he had to decline. I guess he was doing another movie or whatever. So the choice finally fell on then still unknown Max Schreck. So that's the thing. I don't know if Max Schreck did anything like that on the stage, but it sounds like similar to Lugosi, was definitely not a top choice.
First choice, no.
Not even close. They when you hear terms like we had to settle on, it was like, oh, they had to fight, and like, oh, is he going to be good for this role? Again, he was really not that known, so he was. And again, I think maybe 15 minutes of screen time altogether. He doesn't have a lot of screen time, but man, oh man, the times he's on screen,
it's important.
Yeah,
it's important, and it makes it worthwhile.
And he's the top billed guy.
Yeah.
And he's barely in the movie. So, I mean, they shot a lot of this stuff, the exterior shots in Wismar. So, I mean, it's authentic at least.
Yeah.
Whereas Dracula, other than the beginning sequences, the Hungarian sequences, everything else is on a studio lot.
Right.
There's a lot of exterior shots. And there was a score for this movie.
Really?
Yeah, there was.
A proper score.
See, some of those movies over in Europe, like Sergei Eisenstein had a literal score for Battleship Potemkin as an example.
Right.
And I believe Fritz Lang had a score for Metropolis.
Okay.
So some of these movies did have scores.
Well, that makes sense.
Over in Europe. I don't know about the United States.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the silent movies. So,
right.
I mean, so you're not budgeting out for the sound recording equipment, and you also had to make sound too. Like you had to recreate a thunderstorm for sound or raining for. So without having to do that, I mean, you have the extra money to pay a composer to, all right, play music to this.
Right.
You know.
Well, it seemed like in Europe they had film scores. There wasn't a lot of that. I don't even know if D.W. Griffith, because he's the most prominent silent filmmaker in the American silent era.
Right.
But yeah, the score, it was literally composed by Hans Erdmann, and it was performed by an orchestra. However, most of the score has been lost. There's some of it that does remain. Mm-hmm. So just like with, Metropolis, you have different composers. They got like sort of the theme, but they kind of had to ad lib, if you will.
Right.
Like James Bernard, guy who did so many of the Hammer films, the Hammer horror films,
Yep.
the iconic scores for him. Well, he wrote a score for a reissue. His score was released in 1997, and Erdmann's original score was reconstructed by these musicologists. That did you ever you could become a musicologist? Did you know that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I haven't heard the term musicologist, but I've heard like a doctor in music.
Right. Yep.
But apparently Gillian Anderson and James Kessler, they reconstructed Hans' score and released that in 1995. There were several missing sequences composed anew to try to match that original style. Mm-hmm. Then there was an earlier reconstruction by another German composer who had like many editions of unrelated classical work. So in 2022, the New York Times, of all places, wrote about the Dutch composer Joseph van Vissem's new score and released, I guess they had a release record for Nosferatu. It had a solo played on the lute. His performance has like electric guitar, distorted recordings of extinct birds.
Wow.
Obviously to give the whole gothic horror vibe to it, He said, "My soundtrack goes from silence to noise over the course of 90 minutes, culminating in dense, slow death metal." I guess the new score and everything, it was played live with the movie in October of 2023. So again, it's too bad. That's another thing that, things get lost, especially things back then. There wasn't a huge, we got to preserve this.
And exactly. And then, you top that with the lawsuit and the order of everything to be destroyed.
Right. And probably the score, some of that got lost with it.
And again, remember this, this is primitive filmmaking at the time. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about, when we got to the sound era and in the silent era, unlike the way, the little blue band you see on a normal film strip, that is the soundtrack.
Right.
That was not there. That hadn't been invented yet. So you basically had a record, a vinyl,
right.
that you would play in conjunction with, it was timed out, you had to time it perfectly or else it would be off. But especially when we got to dialogue.
Right.
But yeah, these things were giant vinyl records that you would just play in time with the movie. So,
and some theaters actually had an organist play.
Yes. Yep.
And if there was no score, they'd kind of just improvise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
again, and you see things like that pop up. I know with about 15 years ago, one of the biggest finds when it came to Frankenstein 1931, someone found the a set of the original vinyl pressings for the soundtrack, the dialogue track to Frankenstein, which is, that's pretty cool.
Right.
And it's, again, so in Nosferatu's case, it's, on top of how they treated film, again, it wasn't anything to be preserved. It wasn't, anything to archive. It was recycled. It was reused. It was thrown out. It was destroyed. So I'm sure it was the same thing with these vinyl tracks. I'm sure the vinyl was remelted and used for something else. And then again, we keep saying it, the lawsuit from Widow Stoker, destroy it all. Well,
yeah.
A lot of it got destroyed.
Right. So let's talk about the premiere. I mean, the movie did have a premiere. It was over in the Netherlands, February 16th, 1922. That was its big premiere, at the Hague Flora and Olympia cinemas. It premiered in Germany on March 4th of that year, and it was planned as a large society evening called the Festival of Nosferatu. Guests were asked to arrive dressed in the costumes and everything like that. So, I mean, unfortunately, the Stokers weren't too happy with that.
Not at all. Well, the estate wasn't,
No.
Obviously, Bram himself had been long dead by the time this movie came out. So, who knows if he would have been cool with it, but
well, I mean,
clearly she wanted a payday.
Right. Well, let's use Akira Kurosawa as an example. When Leone was making Fistful of Dollars in Italy, which we'll talk about in 1964.
Yeah.
We do our special on that coming up soon. But, it was basically Yojimbo as a Western.
Right.
And, Leone's, I had no idea. And they're like, come on. It's the same.
Yeah, exactly.
He had to pay a crap load of money to Kurosawa because Kurosawa was upset. Now, if he had gone to him in the first place, probably would have had to pay a little less, But the getting permission is so key. So the 1930 sound version, there was a sound version of this, the 12th Hour, A Night of Horror, commonly, I guess it's less commonly known now, was a completely unauthorized re-edited version of the film. I guess it was released in May of 1930 with sound on disc accompaniment and the recomposition of the score. A German production manager, composer of music, had like an alternative ending, lighter than the original, and the characters were again renamed. So the Count turns into Prince Volkov, Nock became Karsten, Hutter and Ellen became Kuhnberg and Margita, and Annie was changed to Maria. Now, Murnau was unaware of this. It had a lot of scenes filmed by Murnau, but previously not released. So there's some, where did all this footage come from?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But I don't know. It was that happened with Night of the Living Dead for many years. There was all these unofficial versions where they filmed different scenes, put it in with the rest of the movie, and talk about like, I guess garbage isn't the right word to use, but it's just like, come on, really?
Yeah.
It was this, definitely
just because you
not
put more in doesn't
professionals.
make. Just because you put a little bit more in doesn't necessarily make it better.
Yeah, it's amateur hour. You know? It's a fan made. If you call it a fan made movie, that's fine, but don't use previously filmed footage. It's like, come on, So I mean, obviously, Nosferatu brought Murnau into the public eye, and I guess there was another film that was similar that was released a few days later. Press reported extensively on Nosferatu and its premiere. With the laudatory votes, there was also occasional criticism that the technical perfection and clarity of the images did not fit the horror theme. Here we go. Is it a horror movie?
Yeah, no, it's a horror movie, people.
Yeah.
It's a horror, yeah.
Yeah. So Nosferatu was the first film to show a vampire dying from exposure to sunlight. We've already covered that. But I guess Dracula, like what you said, here it says Dracula was uncomfortable with sunlight, but not like, deadly, frighteningly so.
Yeah, it weakened him, but it didn't kill him.
Right. So, I mean, it's to me the greatest vampire film ever. I know Roger Ebert said, he loved it too, which Roger Ebert was very hard on genre movies, especially
horror, horror. Yeah, I mean,
well, even westerns too.
Yeah,
it's like he took back his original rating on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because he didn't think spaghetti westerns could be art. He literally said that. It's like, come on. Let's talk about the remake. You see F.W. Murnau's version of Nosferatu. It sounds like on a yearly basis, just like I do.
Yeah. when I owned my retail store, which we dealt with a lot of horror merch, I played it more frequently. But yeah, usually around Halloween time when we're having people over and entertaining and doing fun Halloween stuff, it's one of the ones I'll throw on the TV just for background. And, it's fun. It's, what better way to get you into the Halloween, spirit and seeing Max Shrek lurking around in the background.
But you did see Werner Herzog's Nosferatu,
Yes.
right? In 1979.
Yep.
What are your thoughts of that film?
It was okay. It clearly not as impactful as the original. I honestly kind of it kind of dragged. It was kind of boring a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because this one was just as well received by the audience.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I guess maybe there's just a charm to the original that I just really, really appreciate. And seeing it redone in, I don't know, kind of lost that charm.
Really?
I guess. Yeah.
I see. I loved it, and he definitely focused more on the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's, if you look at the length, it's only 12 minutes longer than the original. But I like how he kind of meshes both. It's obviously a remake of Murnau's masterpiece, but he also puts some Dracula in there because Count Orlok is now Count Dracula.
Yeah.
Jonathan Harker is Jonathan Harker. It's, and Klaus Kinski is in it. And I guess there's two versions of the film, one in which the actors speak English, one they speak German. Because I was watching behind the scenes after I watched it. I only have the German version.
I saw the English version.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Because like behind the scenes you see Isabella Johnny like speaking English.
Yeah.
And Klaus is speaking some English, which is interesting. But
yeah, I saw the English speaking version.
Yes. But this takes place in 1850, so it's kind of similar to the book in that aspect. But, of course, the whole Van Helsing is like not really much of anything in this.
No.
He's a very weak character. And it's kind of a drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And there are similarities between both of them, but Herzog is much more of a raw, authentic director. Yeah. So you see the people like literally struggling with what they think is the plague, like the big party sequence at the end. This is it. We're going to die of the plague. And so let's have a brouhaha. And it's really like over the top, but it's, at the time they thought they were going to die. They thought it was the actual literal plague when
let's go out with a bang.
Yeah. But it was a vampire that was killing everyone. And they didn't know it though.
Yeah.
And even
those damn vampires. I never trust them.
They suck the life out of you, don't they? But that's the thing. It's Van Helsing's character doesn't know anything about all this stuff, and he misdiagnoses, Mina at the end, and somehow they come across the information. They know that sunlight, just like the original, they find out that they do their own research. It's not so much the doctor in the original Nosferatu actually has some know-how here, and not so much in the remake. They kind of have to figure it out for themselves, and so she sacrifices herself just like in the original. But what's interesting is Dracula takes Jonathan Harker and sucks and possesses him enough so he becomes the next Nosferatu. Yeah. And he just goes riding off into the endless enigma, whatever that is. It's not sunset. He doesn't ride off into the sunset.
Certainly doesn't.
Herzog movies, they don't usually end on a happy note, and this one's very ambiguous ending too. And he rides off into eternity because he's now the Count.
Yeah.
So so is it? You think the movie drags? Is that why you didn't like it?
I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying I preferred the original over the over the remake. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie. I don't know. I just if you're gonna ask me to choose one to rewatch, I'm gonna take the original. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the original. I gave this adaptation 4.5 stars. You know, and I put it at least on par with the 1931 Dracula as far as ratings are concerned.
Yeah.
But Nosferatu is the best vampire movie I've ever seen, and I mean I haven't seen as many of them as you have, but it's just nothing.
It's up there.
Nothing comes close to F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu. Nothing as far as, and Herzog himself says, very shockingly, the greatest film to come out of Germany is Nosferatu. That's what he loved that movie so much, and he made a very respectable remake, and he made it his own. He didn't like copy Murnau. He was inspired by the use of cinematography, and I will say that he does spend a lot more time with the cinematography, with the sets, than Murnau did. That's what probably gives it the longer kind of feeling. He stretches time out a little bit more in a different way.
Yeah.
Which is not for all tastes. I can understand that. But Klaus Kinski as Dracula, I'm sure there's some stuff in here. But I guess there was some animal cruelty in this movie. Did you hear about this?
I did not hear about this.
So there was this Dutch behavioral biologist. Got to love that.
Yeah.
Hired by Herzog for his expertise with laboratory rats, revealed that after witnessing the inhumane way in which the rats were treated, he no longer wanted to be cooperated with this film.
Oh, wow.
So apart from traveling conditions that were so poor for the rats, they were imported from Hungary, of all places, the rats.
Yeah.
They had started to eat each other upon arrival in the Netherlands. Herzog insisted the plain white rats be dyed gray. To do so, according to this, the cages containing the rats needed to be submerged in boiling water for several seconds, causing another half of them to die.
Jeez.
So the surviving rats proceeded to lick themselves clean of the dye immediately. The biologist predicted they would. Now, this biologist also implied sheep and horses that appear in the movie were treated very poorly, but it not specify any further. Just so you know, did you ever see the Fitzcarraldo movie?
No.
All right, so Fitzcarraldo is based on Fitzcarraldo, who built a ship to bring it over a mountain, literally carry the boat over the mountain. So what did Herzog do? He replicated a real boat and had the crew carry it over the mountain. This is how authentic Herzog is.
Yeah.
Christian Bale, Steve Zahn on the set of Rescue Dawn ate bugs, real bugs. They lost all this weight, and Bale is the type of director that can stand the demands of Werner Herzog. He's a very demanding director. Him and Klaus Kinski loved and hated each other. Wow. And actually, Herzog made a documentary, My Favorite Fiend. They threatened to kill each other on the set and punching each other. And
that's a good working relationship to be a fly on the wall in that place. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a pleasant movie. It's an emphasis on like the tragic loneliness of the vampire. That's one thing Klaus Kinski's Dracula is. You're kind of sympathetic to him because he's very pathetic in a lot of ways. He's so lonely. Like he has all this eternity of loneliness.
Yeah.
And he notes that several times in the movie. So it is an interesting, a different perspective on the vampire,
right?
Making him a more tragic character. Coppola would go on to make a more romantic Dracula, which is very implied in the novel that Dracula, there's a lot of romanticism about the vampire in there.
Yeah.
They don't talk about the loneliness of the vampire.
No.
Bram Stoker does not mention that at all. And even the F.W. Murnau movie didn't talk about the loneliness, but Herzog, it's like he focused on that loneliness quite a bit. And that whole Harker, now a vampire riding off into eternity, he's going to be lonely too.
The cycle starts again.
Yeah. You feel like it's an endless cycle on that. I mean, it does have an element of horror. There's numerous deaths, grim atmosphere. It's not a very happy movie. I mean, the movie opens up with like this it's like the castle with all these skeletons everywhere.
Yeah.
That's how the movie opens up. And knowing Herzog, it's probably real life skeletons. It's not fake ones.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, it has a more expanded plot than any other Dracula productions, though. And again, it's that whole theme of loneliness, and it really gets into the mind of Dracula more, I think. So I love the remake. I mean, obviously you can't top the original. No one can.
Nope.
I mean, it was just a phenomenon, and I'm glad that not all of the copies were destroyed because, I mean, I know Shadow of the Vampire. I don't know how much of that was real. Did you ever watch Shadow of the Vampire?
I did watch Shadow of the Vampire.
I've never read any. There's not a lot known about Max Schreck. Have you?
No. No, very little.
You read in Skull's whole breakdown of the Dracula universe. What did he say about Nosferatu? Both versions.
Basically, all he said was just, how important of a movie it was, how groundbreaking of a movie it was. But he also discussed what you were just saying is how there's really no information on this movie, what went into the making of the movie. Nothing on Max Schreck, hardly at all.
I know, because other than this movie, he's usually either bit parts or supporting.
Yeah.
He's never really had the lead. If there's any movies he was the lead in, those movies are destroyed or can't be found.
Yeah, but the thing is, he left a lasting impact shared today. I mean, like Salem's Lot, Mr. Barlow is a Nosferatu, Max Schreck type vampire.
Yeah.
For you Tim Burton fans, the villain in Batman Returns, played by Christopher Walken, Max Schreck.
Yeah, that's his name.
Max Schreck. It's. I mean, like Metropolis and all those other wonderful, early silent movies that just broke so much ground. Its impact is just phenomenal.
Right. But there was even a musical. Did you know about that?
I knew about I haven't seen it. I've heard about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I think it was like a stage musical, because I don't think they've ever released a movie. But speaking of movies, 102 years later, we're getting yet another adaptation of Nosferatu later on this year. Robert Eggers is directing it, which I will watch it, because watching Eggers' films on the big screen, there's no director right now that has a better sense of time and place than Eggers. However, his movies are far from being perfect. I mean, I guess there's no such thing as being perfect when you're a human being, but his stories have a lot to be desired. The Witch had a lot. Again, the atmosphere was good. The buildup was good, but it was just like the ending was just like flying around naked. I'm like, okay. I know the guy researches time and place very well. Probably, again, better than most. And then the Northman, the sets, the cinematography were top notch. And why they weren't nominated for Academy Awards, we'll never know. But it's just the movie left a bad taste in your mouth. Did you ever watch any of those movies?
I haven't, no.
I mean, again, you would probably enjoy The Witch more than I did. I'm in the minority because a lot of people love The Witch. And his movies get great home boutique label treatments. We'll have to wait and see. One of the Skarsgårds plays Count Orlok. Yep. And as far as I know, they're named after the Murnau movie.
Characters,
they're not named Count Dracula like the Werner Herzog one.
So it's going to be
Willem Dafoe's in it too, which any movie with Willem Dafoe in it, I will watch, because he did have a small part in The Northman.
Oh, cool.
And he makes an impact in any role he's in, even in a real crappy movie like Speed 2.
Yeah.
Nosferatu lives on, and it's a new movie coming out this year. We'll watch it, of course, and let you know what our thoughts of it.
Also another thing to note for, those of you out there who listen who are maybe into showing movies and presenting movies, Nosferatu in 2019 became public domain.
Right. I will say, though, if you're going to get a copy of Nosferatu on home video, you got to get the Kino one, which was released a couple years back. Yeah. It's got both the English titles and the German titles, so you can watch it in either format. There's extensive behind-the-scenes stuff, which I did not have time to watch before we did this episode, but highly recommend it. Kino Lorber. Again, I'm not usually a huge fan of Kino Lorber stuff, because there's not a lot of features on it, but this is a 2-disc Blu-ray. Exhaustive information, like all of their German Expressionist releases. It's very extensive with the features.
Very cool.
Yeah, so check out Nosferatu on Blu-ray, and of course, the Werner Herzog one, there's a few ways you can get it. Like, there's a couple of Herzog box sets you can get overseas, and if you want to import it overseas, or there's some copies here in America. I've heard some mixed reviews on the quality of the discs, and some of them become dislodged and scratched. Either way, you can if you love one, you will enjoy the other. Maybe not as much, but enough to watch. Like, it's been years since I revisited the Herzog one, and my appreciation for it just continues to grow every time I watch it. The first time I watched it, I was like, really? Harker turning into a vampire? But after watching it 4 or 5 times, I okay, that makes sense. I mean, Herzog is a brilliant filmmaker, and he doesn't get enough credit for his works, but his is a little more raw and more real than any vampire adaptation. But the best vampire movie all time, in my opinion, and one of the greatest films ever made, Nosferatu by F.W. Murnau.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reals.